People from Viking times had the best sleep throughout history. In the mist-laced folds of ancient fjords, where warriors rode dreams instead of long ships and pillows weighed heavier than iron, lies a forgotten truth. The people of Viking times were legendary not just for conquest, but for their naps. They didn't just sleep, they transcended. Beneath sod roofs and starlit snows, these drowsy marauders mastered the art of deep slumber like no civilization before or since. While modern humanity tosses, turns, and scrolls itself into insomnia, the Vikings lay curled in wool-wrapped stillness, entering dreams that could outlast battles. Some swore by the sacred Snuggaret, a code of honor involving pre-dawn cuddles and post-plunder meditation naps. Others whispered of the mythical 8-hour helm, forged not for war, but perfect rest. This story isn't about bloodshed or treasure, it's about the gentle snore echoing through history, the silent saga of sleepy supremacy. Prepare to be lulled by moss beds, soothed by mist chants, and gently rocked into historical drowsiness, as we embark on the only Viking saga where nobody screams, but everyone sleeps like kings. Let the yawning begin. Long before the invention of bedsheets with floral patterns or the rise of mattress commercials voiced by overly enthusiastic narrators, the northern clan Slater, romanticized as Vikings, had already perfected the art of sleep. Not merely rest, not just casual dozing, but sleep as a systematic institution of cultural pride. Around the mid-8th century, nestled between tundra and trade route, the Viking Langus emerged as not just a domestic dwelling, but a somnolent fortress. These elongated wood and sod structures, stretching 15 to 30 meters like sleepy serpents across the icy landscape, were carefully constructed to minimize external disruption. Stone hearths positioned strategically near the center radiated warmth that diffused gently into the moss-stuffed bedding zones. The walls were crafted with overlapping planks to mute the howling wind. Floors were sometimes layered with thick straw mats to cushion footsteps that might otherwise disrupt light sleepers and delicate dreamers. Within these langies, sleep was deeply stratified and ceremonial. The hearth-circular revered sleeping formation around the central fire was designated for respected elders and sheep. Warriors, on the other hand, were often placed near the entrance, not only to defend against intrusions, but also to access fresh air for post-snore rehydration rituals. Entire families curled up in overlapping sleep spirals, a tradition known as this created intimate warmth and communal dreams. It was commonly believed that by sleeping in this configuration, one's soul could drift into a shared subconscious fjord, known in rune literature as the Whispering Fog. Scholars now suspect this might have been an early Viking version of group therapy conducted through synchronized REM cycles. Viking sleep schedules followed not the clock, but the sun, the tide, and occasionally the melancholy of a raven. Typically, sleep began shortly after the third yawn of the eldest member Anne. Unspoken signal and ended either at sunrise or upon the arrival of a goat in the longhouse, whichever occurred later. Interestingly, early Norse poems reveal fragments of sleepy praise such as "to slumber with the winds," and "wake with none is to be Odin's child," and "the nap is one." It is speculated this poem was either a lullaby or a passive-aggressive complaint about noisy raiders staying up too late. Beyond their dwellings, the Vikings developed rudimentary sleep accessories. Bundles of birch bark soft in snow drifts served as early pillows, while pelts stitched with thistledown acted as primitive weighted blankets. Some sagas reference all sleep trousers pants so thick and plush they doubled as bedding for the legs and sometimes small livestock. Viking sleep wasn't just habit, it was philosophy. This prominent Norse thinker, Frodi, once theorized that the mind was a longboat drifting across an ocean of dreams, and sleep was its anchor. While his teachings never spread widely, likely because most of his lectures dissolved into mumbling and snoring, they offer tantalizing clues into a society that considered sleep sacred. And so begins our saga, with thunderous raids or clashes of steel, but with the gentle rustle of straw, the low hum of fire-warmed breath, and the communal exhale of contented sleepers. As the Viking sleep philosophy matured, so did the obsession with where and upon what one should drift into the whispering fog of dreams. Gone were the days of barbaric burground slumber. By the 9th century, sleep surfaces became a point of pride and passive-aggressive social competition. At the core of every respectable Viking longhouse was the sleep mound, also called the Suvenklump, a carefully curated pile of moss and wool engineered for both comfort and honor. Not just any moss could be used, mind you. A strict classification system emerged, with moss types like preferred for winter napping due to its superior insulation and anti-wrinkle properties. Silka moss, or silky moss, was favored by romantic dreamers, while angamoss, known for its calming fragrance, was reserved for those undergoing emotional healing or contemplating post-trade existential dread. The harvesting of moss was itself a sacred seasonal ritual called the Viking youth was sent out with carved antler rakes and instructed to whisper apologies to the earth with every uprooted tuft. Moss disputes occasionally led to low-stakes clan feuds, with documented cases of sheep theft followed by retaliatory pillow sabotage. Once the moss was gathered, it was layered over a base of braided straw and tucked inside pelts sewn with shipple soft, thick, and judged on fluffiness metrics using early snooze-based taxonomy. Sheep were pampered and sung to before shearing. One lullaby translated loosely as, "Give your wool for sleep divine, and snore with us when stars align." Master sleepsmiths often held community workshops on wool density calibration, a technique involving pressing one's cheek into the bedding while muttering a historic prayer. These rituals were often attended by chieftains and traveling poets whose verses were frequently inspired by bedding quality. Advanced Viking sleepers were permitted to add sleepstone smooth river rocks, believed to realign spinal harmony and absorb negative snore energy. These were polished with seal oil and occasionally engraved with sacred runes that read, Snurgot, or Savin. Rumors from distant shores spoke of Icelandic Vikings who went so far as to import sleep feathers from migratory birds in Greenland. Although this may have been exaggerated by saga authors seeking regional clout, by the late Viking Age, it was considered dishonorable to sleep on anything less than 4 layers of moss, 2 of wool, and 1 soothing rune. Archaeologists today marvel at the depth and density of sleep surfaces uncovered from excavation sites, often misidentifying them as burial mounds due to their sheer softness. Thus did Viking society elevate sleep from passive necessity to active achievement. Their beds weren't places of rest, they were temples of tranquility, engineered with care, wrapped in tradition, and fluffed with ancestral pride. If ever there was a nap environment sanctioned by the Norse heavens themselves, it was the fjord fog blanketing the coastline like sleepy spirits weaving gauze through pine. Vikings were not merely residents of misty lands, they were devotees of damp drowsiness. Fjord fog, affectionately known as Savendump, was considered a celestial invitation to rest. When the morning mist slithered across the hills and settled upon the Langus rooftops, daily chores were rescheduled or abandoned entirely. A common phrase inscribed on a fragment of a sleep tablet found near Trondheim reads, "The mist is whispered. Postpone the goats." Indeed, mist naps were so integral to Viking life that a position called the dream weather advisor was created. This individual would study fog density with hand gestures and determine the optimal nap durations for the day. Scrolls recovered from the Bergen archives include fog ranking tables with categories like mild drizzle of moderate mist of meditation, and the revered full blanket fog of fated sleep. Outdoor naps in the fog were not only permitted, they were celebrated. Warriors often found their deepest rest curled against wet rocks, near cascading inlets, whispering lullabies to seals, and occasionally mistaking ducks for pillows. Children were encouraged to play in haze until they slumped into unconscious serenity. Viking poets composed verses to describe the sensation of mist-sleep. Blanket of breath, wrap me in white, as Odin's sigh steals away night. Fog-induced naps were thought to transport souls closer to the realm of cold and silence, not as a place of punishment but as a cradle of introspection. It was believed that if one dreamt during a particularly thick fog, their subconscious could reach ancestors whispering wisdom through condensation. The resulting dreams were compiled into the sleep books, a genre of literature so soporific that only seasoned nap scholars dared read them without yawning themselves into a coma. Napping rituals included rubbing pine sap on one's cheeks to attract dream spirits of the mist, though later this was found to attract bears. Nevertheless, the tradition persisted and eventually inspired a generation of mist-based lullaby composers known as the Tip. By the turn of the 10th century, it was customary for weddings, births, and treaty signings to be scheduled precisely around the arrival of sleep fog. One particularly well-known, Treatise Nap Accord of Nordfjord, was entirely conducted with both parties lying down, feet touching, snoring intermittently between negotiations. Thus, the Viking relationship with fog was not merely environmental, it was emotional, spiritual, and fundamentally subconscious. Their fog naps were lullabies composed by nature itself, and to resist them was considered hubris of the highest order. In popular imagination, Viking raiders are forever storming monasteries, wielding axes, shouting heroic nonsense into ocean winds. What often goes overlooked is that nearly all of that screaming and pillaging was done before nap time, because Vikings, being seasoned scholars of bodily balance, adhered strictly to a sacred rhythm: raid by day, rest by dusk. Their conquest calendar was as much about slumber as it was about spoils. The art of timing a raid wasn't just tactical, it was circadian. Most expeditions began precisely at sunsword, the poetic Viking phrase for when the sun glints off your weapon. Chieftains would schedule pillages with a keen eye on how long it would take to plunder, retreat, wash, eat smoked herring, and curled into post-victory fetal positions by nap hour, known as dusk time's embrace. Before embarking, warriors consulted the Sivenskjama, the sleep scroller hidebound chart detailing nap intervals, pillow readiness status, and estimated fog density for optimal post-raid snoozing. Raids that interfered with sleep cycles were considered dishonorable. One notorious Viking, Bjorn the rest-deprived, once attempted a second raid in the same day and later fell asleep mid-pun negotiation, causing a clan feud involving 7 goats and a poetic duel. Once the raids were complete, returning warriors engaged in the drowsing ceremony, a multi-step ritual including battle yawn, a synchronized yawning display to signify fatigue acceptance. Cuddle rankings. Warriors were awarded snuggle positions based on performance and poetic flair. Pelting of the pelt. Selection of ideal bedding fur tossed ceremonially into the air, while elders judged its floatiness. Young Viking apprentices were taught early to balance aggression and repose, often with parables like, "Swing thy sword, but know thy snooze, for blood runs fast, but sleep doth ooze." Historical sleep tablets describe longhouse life, post-raid as a calm hush of soft chewing, moss flumping, and gentle dream drift, with the fire crackling and loot stacked against the door. Even hardened warriors became whispering snorers wrapped in smoky tranquility. Interestingly, Viking ships, those famed longboats with dragon heads, featured nap hammocks suspended between oars. These mobile sleep units were deployed during return voyages for restorative slumber on the waves. Sea naps were accompanied by quiet, lute music and mild snoring competitions, the loudest of which were recorded in the snore scrolls of sea. Thus, Vikings honored a principle lost to time. War was temporary. Naps were eternal. They marched through villages for gold, yes, but mostly to earn the moral right to collapse dramatically into handcrafted sheepbeds by the orange breath of dusk. Long before choirs harmonized in candlelit cathedrals, Viking tribes conducted their own sacred performances not with lutes and voices, but with snoring. This wasn't mere sleep-induced nasal honking. It was a spiritual and social event known as the Snorreheim, the great ceremony of snore alignment. Held annually under the shimmering gloom of the aurora the tribes gathered inside the communal longhouse, where each Viking, from the shrill snoring youths to the guttural sighing elders, was positioned on a carefully marked snore grid. These positions were determined by tone, rhythm, and emotional timbre. Not unlike a pagan sleep orchestra seating chart, key components of the ceremony included snore warm-ups. Warriors rubbed pine oil on their nostrils and consumed fermented goat milk to achieve optimal throat reverb. Snore leaders, assigned based on ancestral snore strength, these elders initiated the first rumble, setting the harmonic tone. The unified rumble. Once aligned, the house resonated with a layered, sonic breathscaper, lullaby to the universe itself, or, as Norse scribes called it, the earth's nap whisper. Notably, the most revered of Viking snore priests, Thorland, was said to snore in triple harmonics, causing nearby candles to flicker rhythmically. His snores were transcribed into runes believed to hold clues about the afterlife, and may also explain the mysterious disappearance of 45 goats, who reportedly fell into a trance and walked into a Children were trained in an artistic form of rune carving based on the patterns of dream-induced nasal tremors. One famous stone carving shows overlapping snore waves forming what historians believe is either a map to Valhalla or a recipe for smoked trout. Every tribe competed in the snore-off, a championship where clans snored in synchrony, trying to out-vibrate rival longhouses. The winners received the legendary golden ear muff, a sacred artifact designed to allow champions to sleep through anything, including surprise raids and loud poetry recitals. The ceremony ended with the silent drift, a moment when all snoring ceased and the room fell into a hush so profound it was said to tickle the feet of gods. The Vikings believed this silence sealed the dreams and allowed new sagas to root in the subconscious, ready to blossom come morning. If ever there was a chapter whispered reluctantly around Viking firesides, it was this. The flatulence was a historical footnote, best left famine or divine portents, but from excessive legume consumption and poorly ventilated sleeping quarters. The saga begins in a modest fishing village renowned for two things: its abundance of fermented beans and its intense commitment to indoor communal sleeping. During the annual Moss Renewal Festival, tensions rose when two rival families, the Belforts and the Snurblads, were assigned adjacent nap mounds. As luck would have it, both had indulged in heaping portions of Bunabriga stew so potent it could wake ancestors. That evening, the longhouse echoed not with snores, but with seismic disruptions of the intestinal kind. The resulting olfactory conflict sparked the infamous Snurdle Puff Treaty, in which chieftains agreed to nap in rotating shifts to preserve nasal dignity. However, tempers frayed when one Sturblad intentionally fluffed a moss pile near a Belfort elder. What followed was the first documented case of odorous vengeance, recorded in saga as "He who dealt the gust shall feel the mist's distrust." Attempts at mediation through scent shamans proved ineffective. These individuals, trained in aroma balancing and goat scent neutralization, couldn't stem the rise of competitive flatulence, chants so rhythmic they disrupted local fog flow and triggered a minor avalanche of social innovations sprouted from the chaos. Ventilated thrones, wooden seats carved with respectful airless channels, goat buffer zones, passive-aggressive livestock placed between nap circles, herbal snore sachets, lavender bundles worn as sleep masks and defense mechanisms. Eventually, a wise elder named Gudmund the Gassy proposed the Silent Fjord land dispute settlement based on nap integrity and digestive scheduling. According to the terms, late-night stew feasts were banned before dusk, and nappers were encouraged to dream light, eat lighter. Today, the fjord adjacent to Old Snurdal bears a curious geographical feature: the windslope, where ancient sleep ceremonies were reoriented uphill for optimal breeze alignment. Thus, Vikings learned that in the dance of sleep, harmony matters not just of mind and dream, but of gut and gust. The flatulence feud did not divide their tribe. It cleared toward a deeper understanding of communal snooze etiquette. In the intricate social web of Viking society, snuggling wasn't just comfort, it was political architecture. Nested between wool-clad dreams and moss-scented nostalgia lay a finely calibrated system of cuddle privilege, known as the Cozy Ordenda, Order of Cozy. Within the longhouse, snuggle placement was dictated by tribal status, heroics, age, and the elusive snuggle charisma quotient, determined each solstice by sleepy elders humming into goat horns and judging resonance. The closer ones slept at the hearth, the higher their social warmth. These zones were known as core cuddle ring, reserved for respected elders and those who had completed the 3 trials of comfort. Mid-hearth, drift zone, for average sleepers, story weavers, and moss arrangers. Peripheral snooze fringe, young warriors in training and guests who mispronounced bed-sharing negotiations were handled through snuggle councils, in which Vikings bartered furs, lullabies, and rare moss tufts in exchange for proximity to preferred snore partners. These sessions often involved cuddled diplomats, people skilled in emotional persuasion through blanket, origami, and eye contact sign. Snuggle configurations varied by season. In winter, the Cassicabis formation was employed. 6 sleepers arranged in a hexagonal warmth loop, with one designated snore anchor for stability. In spring, the snuggle swirl allowed for increased breathability and dream entanglement. One legendary Viking, Hilda Feathercheek, rose from a humble corner napper to the hearth queen of hug space. Her ascent began with a bold move bringing hot fish soup to the mid-hearth drift zone, which softened hearts and opened fleece boundaries. Hilda's cuddle manifesto became a scroll read during a soft-spoken holiday dedicated to blanket cheering and unsolicited compliments. Despite this structured hierarchy, kindness prevailed. Tribes often practiced rekig, the ritual of offering one's more square to a colder sleeper. This act of thermal humility forged lifelong bonds and, in one case, led to the authorship of a deeply mediocre poem titled To Nap, Perchance to Dream by Fire. Thus, in the longhouse where flames flickered like lazy Valkyries and goat breath puffed through, moonlit crack snuggling became a metric of belonging. It wasn't just about staying warm, it was about knowing your place in the great tapestry of communal dreams. While some cultures danced under moonlight or lit bonfires in honor of gods, Vikings conducted something far gentler: hibernation festivals, multi-day celebrations devoted entirely to sleep. These were not quiet affairs. They were choreographed slumber spectaculars, complete with lullaby orchestras, wool-based confetti, and ceremonial napping formations. Known collectively as these festivals took place during the deepest parts of winter, when the sun appeared only for brief, melancholy sighs. The centerpiece was the great nap arena, a moss-lined crater surrounded by towering ice, each holding flickering sleep flame, a special oil lamp said to mimic the rhythm of a dozing bear's heartbeat. Preparations began weeks in advance. Drowsing costumes, participants dressed in robes stitched from moth wings and dream pelts. The more impractical the garment, the higher its ceremonial sleep value. Pre-nap feasts, stews of sleep-inducing herbs served in bowls carved from hollowed lullaby circles. Village musicians performed midnight slumber songs, compositions so monotonous and soothing they were banned from battlefields for safety reasons. One popular tune, Whispers Beneath the Ice, featured a chorus of sighs, and one haunting cause families formed snore clusters, arrangements of cuddling groups whose rhythmic breathing created harmony zones. Elders lead swaying rituals, where participants rocked back and forth in moss hammocks while reciting ancient sleep poetry. These verses included gems such as "Rest thy toes on moonlit moss, let dream tides slowly turn thee lost." To enter the sleep circle of honor, one had to successfully nap through a thunderstorm, an overeager bard recital, and the aggressive affection of a goat named Neptune. Few achieved this prestige. Children competed in the dream drift, a game where they described imaginary landscapes while descending into sleep. Winning entries often included floating fjords, whispering mead clouds, and the recurring character known as Drowsy the Blinking Elk, who guided dreamers away from laundry-related nightmares. The festival concluded with the soft parade, a slow-motion procession of all participants carrying their favorite sleep items: bundled moss pillows, rune-etched cuddle slippers, and the occasional half-asleep chicken. As fog rolled in and the final snore flute played, Vikings entered synchronized hibernation, dreaming together beneath stars that blinked with approval. Thus did these frost-bound dreamers make sleep not merely a habit, but a public art form, one woven with warmth, whimsy, and woolly wonder. In the annals of Viking lore, few texts are as bewilderingly bureaucratic and oddly serene as the Sleep Codex of Harold the Horizontal, penned, or rather, lazily etched onto slabs of dreamstone by a warlord whose only battlefield was the bed. This codex aimed to regulate every aspect of Viking rest, not out of necessity, but because Harold believed that improper napping could curse the cranial winds. The codex had 9 moss-padded scrolls, each dedicated to a different rule of rest. Scroll I: the law of pillow allocation. No warrior may hoard more than 3 pillows, unless they have performed heroic deeds while snoring. Sharing moss cushions was required, especially with those burdened by dreams of fish. Scroll 3: ritual snore hygiene before napping. One must cleanse the nostrils with the smoke of calming herbs, and one deep sigh from a local owl. Violators faced the dreaded groggy tribunal, composed of elders who hadn't slept in days, and thus judged with extreme Scroll 4: proper sleep. Posturing, sleeping diagonally across the communal nap circle was banned, unless you held the titled Dream Chief. Positions such as the snowdrift collapse, the upside-down moose, and the elbow eclipse were illustrated in the margins with unsettlingly lifelike sketches. Scroll Vi: dream duel protocols. Should 2 warriors enter the same dream and engage in combat, Victory was determined by whoever could forge a spoon from cloud matter first. Dream injuries were logged in the Whimsy Ledger, a book that giggled when opened. Scroll 8. Forbidden dream themes. Dreaming of accounting, laundering, or moderately successful goat farms was strictly outlawed. Offenders were subjected to wake walks, aimless strolls where villagers chanted sleep with flair or not at all. The final scroll, the whispered appendix, detailed the nap summoning ritual, allowing Herald to summon his trusted nap beast, Slumber, a sentient pillow with tusks and a soothing growl. Slumber guarded the codex and occasionally ate parts of it for comfort. To possess the codex was to wield authority over drowsiness itself. It wasn't just law, it was a philosophy, one that insisted sleep should be wild, theatrical, and slightly inconvenient. Scholars today debate whether the codex was sincere or a magnificent prank, but all agree. Herald, the horizontal, forever redefined what it meant to snooze like a sovereign, long before omelets were ordner and toast was just warm bread. There walked among Vikings a man touched by yolks and mystery. Crustbeard, the breakfast prophet, born during a solar eclipse and allegedly swaddled in pancake batter. Crustbeard claimed that each morning meal whispered truths about fate, if only you listened closely to your croissants. His followers, called the Cereal Mystics, established the Temple of Darnished Delights, where every breakfast item was treated with reverence. They studied toast patterns like sacred runes, believing burnt edges foretold tempests, and jam blobs hinted at emotional betrayal. Sacred artifacts of the morning, the spoon of destiny, a warped silver ladle set to shimmer when dipped into porridge that foretells war. The buttery tablet, a slab of hardened butter with imprinted crumbs. Its mysterious geometry was interpreted as a map to the forbidden marmalade caverns. The eternal griddle, a skillet that never cooled, even when buried in snow. Pilgrims touched its surface to receive visions, breakfast, divination rituals. Every sunrise, Crustbeard sat atop the bacon spire, humming the eggiant of Revelations, a tune requiring exactly 4 spoons and a synchronized sneeze to interpret correctly. Those seeking answers had to undergo toast trials, involving 1 slice of bread, a blindfold, and questions yelled into the scramble right, a chaotic ceremony where eggs were thrown at philosophical questions. If they stuck, the answer was yes. If they slid off, destiny was still cooking. Prophecies and paradoxes. Crustbeard's greatest prophecy was the arrival of the Yoke Comet, a celestial omelette destined to bring either peace or a very confusing brunch. He vanished shortly after declaring, "The spoon shall flip, the jam shall weep, and all shall know. Breakfast is merely the dream of lunch." Some claim he dissolved into steam after a particularly spicy sausage. Others say he became the wind that cools morning mead. Regardless, the legacy of breakfast prophecy lives on in whispered syrup chants and philosophical egg puns. In an era where swords decided laws and most councils were just glorified shouting, the fjord-bound Vikings of Fjordford introduced a revolutionary concept, the Meatball Parliament, a legislative body where debate was seasoned with spice and diplomacy was served on skewers. Composition and seating arrangements. The Parliament met in the Gravy Hall, a round chamber built entirely from breadstone and softened daily with steam from a ceremonial stew cauldron. Seating was assigned according to spice tolerance. Fire eaters, advocates of bold reforms, sat near the cauldron. Mild ones, lovers of tradition, sat beside the bread wall for moral support. Pickled observers, outsiders allowed to watch but only speak through interpretive horseradish. Representatives were chosen based on their ability to shape meatballs that matched their ideals. A well-formed quality meatball once won 30 tax exemptions. Legislative proceedings. The opening ritual involved slapping raw meat onto a rune-inscribed table and chanting, "Let the meat be round, let the minds be sharp, let the sauce not curdle in despair." Bills were not written, they were braised. A proposal was submitted as a recipe of reform, with ingredients symbolizing its clauses. For example, sage equals wisdom, onion equals hidden complexity, goat shavings equals unwanted compromise. Votes were cast by throwing 1's meatball across the aroma divide into either the bowl of agreement or the bowl of discontent. Meatballs that missed were called scandal and turnip descent. A major crisis known as the Great Gravy Dispute divided reformists demanded darker gravy. Conservatives insisted on the classic broth style. A rogue delegate, Turnips and the Bitter launched filibusters disguised as root vegetable poetry. One verse, banned for inciting unrest, read, "Stir not thy sauce with false hopes, ladle, for turnips wilt where truth is ladled." Eventually, the crisis ended with the creation of a dual broth policy, allowing 2 gravies per household but requiring biannual ladle inspections. Legacy of the Meatball Parliament, though disbanded after an ill-fated vote on airborne soup delivery, the Parliament left behind a legacy of culinary democracy. Today, in mock parliaments still meet to debate trivial matters like sock legislation and the ethical treatment of stew. And above the Gravy Hall ruins, a statue of the founding chef stands, arms outstretched, meatball aloft, mouth forever saying, "Let us simmer in unity." Deep within the frost-laced groves of Scaldwood, where trees grew in theatrical poses and squirrels were known to recite limericks, the Vikings discovered something astonishing. Their weapons, especially axes, possessed latent musical ambition. Thus began the legendary tradition of whispering axe opera, where enchanted blades sang haunting arias that echoed through timber and time. The cast of blades, the lead performer, was none other than Ariax the falsetto, a battle-worn axe with a penchant for dramatic solos and surprise key changes. His duet partner, Hominy Cleaver, a double-headed axe whose notes could slice fog and soften grudges. Supporting roles were filled by Snag Cut the baritone, resonant chops that rattled bones and inspired emotional vulnerability in bears. Little Shiversteel, a hatchet with stage fright. It only sang from inside, creating a cult fanbase called the Muffled Few. The venue performances were held in the natural amphitheater known as the Ringing Glen, where acoustics were so perfect, even pinecones whispered in applause. The stage was a log polished by generations of nervous warriors pacing during intermissions. The audience sat in moss pews and wore ceremonial earmuffs, not to block the sound, but to capture its flavor, according to tradition. Axe and Arias, the opera's most famous piece, Cleave Me Gently, or Dagger of Regret, stirring ballad about love, loss, and chopping firewood too passionately. Other notable acts included O Log, Why Must You Splinter, a tender lament by axes who yearn for philosophical forestry. The Chip Chorus, where wood chips danced midair, harmonizing in minor thirds before returning to mulch. During the climactic crescendo, 1,000 axes joined in a symphonic swing, their blades striking enchanted stones that released resonant babble. Some stones wept. One proposed marriage to a sword. The silent axe's tragedy. Every opera concluded with the story of Wispier, the mute axe who dreamed of becoming a harp, crafted from regretwood and bound with sorrow string. Whisper never spoke, but its silence moved even the most emotionally constipated Viking to tears. When a frost elf gifted Whisper a single note carved from Issa music, it finally rang. The echo became a lullaby for entire villages, often used to tame wayward goats and soothe fermented tempers. Thus was born a musical legacy where violence met vulnerability. And axes, once symbols of conquest, sang of longing, lullabies, and logs misunderstood. Somewhere, deep in Scaldwood, a blade still hums beneath the bark, waiting for its cue. Led by Ambassador Honctavius, a goose with a monocle and legal immunity, granted during the Treaty of Crumfjord, the feathered cabal operated from the hidden headquarters known as the Nest of Whispered Wings. Located beneath the town's abandoned gravy bakery, the bureau trained geese in stealth honking, silent communications using synchronized neck gestures, pastry smuggling, transporting encrypted messages and croissant layers, document droppings, releasing gooserit decrees mid-flight onto government scrolls. The Great Pastry Manipulation Act. Geese discovered that all laws passed during feast council sessions required at least one pie to be present. Through precise pie placement and aggressive pecking, they ensured confusing legislation like every citizen must toast twice when greeting a feathered official. Goats named after fruits may not critique scones. Such laws led to public unrest, culminating in the creation of the Nordwig Puff Pastry Tribunal, tasked with decoding Goosathard crumbs. The resistance and the goose trials. Not all Vikings accepted avian manipulation. The underground group Sniffers of Truth began tracking suspicious bread behavior. They discovered loaves that quacked when sliced, secret maps hidden in jelly blobs, A goose named Feather McScandal laundering clams in pancake stacks. The infamous goose trial saw Viking lawyers debating with honking defendants. Legal transcripts featured phrases like, "Objection," that honk was clearly suggestive. "We demand bread-based justice." Ambassador Honktavius represented himself, often interrupting proceedings to preen dramatically. Ultimately acquitted on a technicality involving migratory clause ambiguity, he flew off mid-Vedic with a celebratory cinnamon swirl. Legacy and loose feathers. Though the conspiracy waned, Nordwig never fully recovered. To this day, government buildings ban feathered access. A statue of Honktavius stands beside a plaque reading, "Let no puff deceive thy laws." Children play feather diplomacy, a game where alliances are forged with breadcrumbs and betrayed with flap dancers. Nordwig remains a cautionary tale that beneath serene quacks may lurk strategies as sharp as beaks and buttery as infiltration. When night fell over the Viking realms and mead ran thin, the midnight skalds would emerge, poets cloaked in raven-feathered robes, wielding quills carved from crescent moons and voices that echoed through fjords like melancholic owls. Their job, serenade the sky. Their problem, the sky had opinions. The Skald-Stella feud, it began innocently. A skald named Tumna the verbose rhymed Ursa Minor with Pickelbriner, and the constellation took offense. Soon, stars began filing cosmic grievances, communicated via meteor complaints, and passive accusations included misquoting Orion's memoirs, assigning fictional scandal to the Pleiades, referring to Polaris as a bit needy. The celestial bodies formed the Constellation Guild, appointing Sirius to stern as spokesperson. The Treaty of Twilight Verses. To avoid astral litigation, the Midnight Skalds convened a summit atop Mount Mut, where they drafted the Treaty of Twilight Verses, declaring, "All poems about stars must include at least one sincere compliment." Rhymes involving glitter and bitter were discouraged unless approved by the Galactic Rhyme Council. Nebulous had veto power over metaphorical usage. Negotiations were tense. One shooting star stormed out dramatically, spelling rude across the horizon. Skald adaptations and stellar drama. Post-treaty, Skalds shifted tactics. Some wrote lullabies for lonely, others composed haikulas, Viking haikus sung through hollowed turnips for better resonance. One controversial poem referred to Beetlejuice as emotionally layered and was nominated for a Cosmic Empathy Scroll. Yet tensions flared when a skald named Wimblad the Mild published the Moon-S Bald Spot, a tragedy in 3 phases. The moon retaliated with 3 days of bad tides and 1 misplaced eclipse. Legacy and lingering glimmers. Though harmony was fragile, the tradition endured. Today, when northern lights flicker extra dramatically, it's said the stars are reviewing skald drafts. In some in-scrolls are still passed around for stellar approval ratings, and constellations occasionally blink in Morse to suggest line edits. And somewhere above, the stars still listen, equal parts muse and critic, forever caught between admiration and literary vengeance. In the frostbitten stronghold of frost, nestled between 2 eternally sighing glaciers and 1 perpetually offended goose, justice was not measured by law books, it was baked. The town's revered judiciary, known as the Custard Bench, adjudicated crimes and quarrels using ancient oven rites in a process famously dubbed the Scone Trials. The legal domain. To stand trial, an accused must present a scone baked with intent, remorse, and at least 2 metaphors. The pastries were evaluated by the Crumb Council, an assembly of flavor philosophers, butter sages, and the elusive Judge Whiskerstein, whose gavel was a ladle, and whose wig was actual whipped cream. Each scone told a story. Flaky crusts indicated guilt. Improper rise suggested emotional repression. A soggy middle foretold dishonesty or romance with a marmalade thief. Famous cases. The most infamous, the muffin that betrayed the morning, a tale of espionage, overmixing, and stolen blueberries. Its creator, Thurner Crumblestar, was accused of encoding forbidden gossip into pastry. When sliced during trial, the muffin revealed Bjorn wears socks made of shame. Public outrage ensued. Thurner was sentenced to 6 weeks of compulsory kneading in the bakery mines, and Bjorn became the first Viking to wear sandals in winter, a bold defiance of sock judgment. Trial procedures. The Dokreed, sworn by all participants while holding stale biscuits of truth. The Custard Interrogation, a warm, probing conversation conducted via spoon strokes across the defendant's pudding, testimony crumblings. Witnesses presented bonds as alibis. Fresher pastries held more credibility. Verdict bake-off. If the council couldn't agree, two opposing sides created final scones. The more emotionally expressive pastry was declared legally victorious. Philosophical impact. The trial sparked centuries of culinary jurisprudence. Scrolls such as the Tart Manifesto and Precedent of the Crust are still quoted in modern Viking debate circles. One clause reads, "Let no scone rise falsely, nor jam coat ill intent." Historians suspect the scone trials led to Frostal, celebrated emotional literacy. Even goat-herders expressed themselves in bread metaphors and pastry-based apologies. Justice in Frostal was tender, warm, and best served with tea and cautious introspection. Though the custard bench eventually dissolved into a fondue scandal, its legacy remains. That sometimes truth is best revealed through crumbs. Far beyond the ice-kissed whispers of deep within the fog-choked alleyways of Berg, there thrived an elusive guild known only as the Dreamsmiths. Sleep artisans, so devoted to rest, their yawns were rumored to bend reality. These were not mere pillow makers or blanket knit. These were architects of dreams, alchemists of slumber, crafting fermented potions and sculpting subconscious journeys from wool and wonder. Fermented sleep elixirs. Each dreamsmith was trained to brew dream droplets, a tonic made from distilled fog harvested at moonrise, aged gooseberries spoken to in lullaby. Trace amounts of melted echo. These elixirs induced vivid, tailored dreams, snowball tournaments between clouds, philosophical conversations with bread, and, once, a 9-hour saga of heroic goats discussing love under oak trees. Overuse could result in snore hallucinations, a condition causing one to believe their nose had opinions. Pillow-based clairvoyance. Dreamsmiths believed certain pillows could predict the future. Called Vision Squish, these enchanted sleep cushions contained batting infused with midnight rain runes, stitched in invisible thread by left-handed foxes' secret compartments, holding whispers of snooze. Tiny scrolls inscribed by dreaming mice. Sleeping on a Vision Squish was said to trigger prophetic dreams, such as the fall of a fence, a surprise pie uprising, or one extremely controversial forecasts involving socks and betrayal. Dream design consultations. Patrons traveled from far-off isles to request customized subconscious experiences, such as romantic daydreams featuring puddles that flirt, hero quests involving oats cakes and talking spoons, peaceful naps under imagined skyfish mic. Each design required an interview during which the dreamsmith asked questions like, "What flavor is your melancholy?" or "Do stairs ever judge you in dreams?" Answers informed the Featherblend, the Great Snooze Symposium. Once per decade, Dreamsmiths hosted an event where the guild's best minds debated pressing sleep issues, where the clouds experienced emotional burnout, the ethics of dreaming about one's own past naps if yawns could be weaponized in political settings. Discussions were held inside a giant quilt tent. Attendees were encouraged to nap between arguments to avoid rhetorical fatigue. Though the guild dissolved mysteriously, their legacy lives in Bergen's meandering sighs and unusually philosophical pillows. It is said that if you sleep with a gooseberry under your tongue during a snowstorm, a dreamsmith may visit your dreams, offering fermented fog and unsolicited bedtime advice. Once every winter solstice, when the sky over Jurgensfall shimmered with vibrant curtains of cosmic color, the villagers held a celebration, so drowsy it could make the moon yawn. The Auroras Snoriolis, a sleep-themed festival of synchronized, snoozing lullaby duels and astral cuddles beneath the blinking eye of space. Nap dances of the North. Festival nights began with the Slumber Shuffle, a slow-motion waltz performed in quilts, where partners traded dreams by touching elbows. If one dancer fell asleep mid-spin, it was considered a triumph. The best couples could exchange entire plot lines of subconscious sagas in 3 steps and a snore. Judges awarded extra points for dreaming about cheese diplomacy, maintaining REM during rotations. Unintelligible muttering with dramatic flair, the Lullabatal Arena in the frosted amphitheater. Sleep bards competed in the Lullabatal, a lyrical duel to lull the crowd into communal dozing. Classic hits included Ode to the Sleepy Sock and May Your Yawns Be Infinite. One infamous bard used only whale sighs and rustling moss to win in 724 BC. In case of a tie, participants had to summon the Blanket of Judgment, a sentient duvet that snuggled the loser gently until they accepted defeat, skyfish migrations and whispering wool as midnight approached. Sleepy pilgrims laid on moss beds and watched the aurora, skyfish, swim through the stars, shimmering beasts made of light and drowsiness. It was said that catching sight of one would cause a brief personality swap with the nearest sleeping squirrel. Wool merchants sold whispering blankets, which murmured calming nonsense like giraffes invented boredom, and your eyebrows forgive you. These were highly sought after, especially by philosophers experiencing existential napcrite. The Yawn Choir and Teacup Communion. A highlight of Aurora Snoriolis was the Yawn Choir, composed of villagers trained to yawn melodically in harmony with the northern lights. Their synchronized exhalations had been known to soothe grumpy bears and inspire short poems in forgotten languages. Afterward, attendees partook in the Teacup Communion, a ritual where warm sleep tea was sipped from ancient cups shaped like regretful hedgehogs. Though the festival ends at dawn, the dreams linger in the air like perfume made of bedtime stories and slow-motion giggles. And somewhere, behind a curtain of stars, the dreamsmiths of Bergen hum approvingly, probably while constructing a hammock between planets. In the sleepy village of Snorheim, nestled between two particularly lethargic hills, an ancient tradition was kept alive. The Napstackle course, a grueling test of competitive dozing, where elite nappers battled not for glory, but for the coveted title of supreme snoozer of the realm. Only those with the fortitude to nap through turbulence, distraction, and emotional baggage could hope to triumph. The Bedlift Race's first event, Bedlift Sprinting, competitors lay flat upon enchanted beds that glided along winding tracks. The goal? Stay asleep while speeding past absurd obstacles. Alarm clocks screaming philosophical dilemmas, mimes attempting tax audits, strobe-lit existential dread zones. Victory was awarded to the participant who snored the loudest, without flinching during the thunderous duck parade. A traditional distraction technique involving geese in drag, pillow jousts mounted atop rolling mattresses. Jousters faced off, using oversized pillows filled with giggling ghosts. The objective: unseat your opponent while reciting dream poetry with convincing sincerity. Famous battle cries included, "Nap or be napped," for the honor of horizontal consciousness. "Softness is strength, and feathers are fury." Spectators were encouraged to throw marshmallows for dramatic flair and occasional philosophical commentary. The final test, a triathlon of sleep-based skill, power napping in adverse weather. Thunderstorms, simulated via grumpy clouds and passive-aggressive wind. Sleepwalking charades. Competitors had to mime historical tragedies while fully asleep. REM Capture the Flag. Two teams dreamt collectively, searching for a glowing pillow that only appeared when someone dreamt of betrayal. Judges scored based on drool artistry, sleep haiku composition, and how convincingly a contestant could nap through personal existential crises. The champions dreamed a winner, often celebrated in a lullaby that was translated into 13 dialects of Snay, a lifetime supply of whispering wool socks, a ceremonial nap in the Hall of Pillowed Honor. Dream access to the legendary Drusiverse, a pocket dimension ruled by yawns and governed by bedtime folklore. It's said that one champion once dreamt so vividly, their yawn caused a solar eclipse and 3 goats to reconsider cap. Not all hearts beat to the rhythm of slumber. In the shadowy city of Naktunavan, where clocks ran backwards and shadows refused to sit still, lived a league of sleepless souls, the Insomniacs Assembly, rebels who refused to dream quietly. They were philosophers powered by espresso, poets fueled by existential dread, and owls with legal degrees. For centuries, they toiled awake, watching the dreamsmiths rule the night, but no longer. The revolt had begun. The caffeinated manifesto led by the enigmatic Lady G. The Assembly published a 7-volume treatise titled Sleepless by Nature, Why Night is a Tyrant. Key demands included equitable access to lucid daydreaming, emotional reparations from betrayed alarm clocks, the abolition of bedtime-based monarchy, their rallying slogan, sleep is oppression with a blanket, owl diplomacy and midnight deals to secure allies. The Insomniacs brokered a fragile truce with the Nocturnal Owl Syndicate, who agreed to lend their tactical squeaks in exchange for legal recognition of hooting as poetry 24-hour, access to moonlight archives, custard rights over mysterious glances. One memorable debate ended when an owl quoted Nietzsche mid-yawn, and dissolved for alliances with stunning efficiency. Dream sabotage and pillow espionage revolutionaries infiltrated dreamsmith dens, whispering inconvenient thoughts into enchanted pillows. These included, what if clouds are just slow smoke? Is sleep just long-form blinking? Has anyone ever truly trusted a mattress? Dream portals were stuffed with jitter spores, microscopic agents of anxiety that turned peaceful dreams into interpretive dance routines starring unpaid thoughts. The insomniac's anthem and sleepless parade at the height of rebellion. Trumpets of insomnia blared through the streets, and thousands marched wearing pajamas as protest wear. Their anthem, Dozing is Deceit, combined jazz, existential spoken word, and the sound of unread books closing themselves. Some wielded spoons and ladles, others carried clocks, stuck at 3:17 a.m. The parade concluded with a rousing debate on the metaphysics of yawn ownership, aftermath and sleepless legacy. Though the revolt was eventually soothed by diplomatic negotiations and lavender fog treaties, the assembly's mark endured. Today, every pillow in Noctahaven whispers, not everyone dreams. And sometimes, beneath the moon, an owl pens a legal memo to the stars, stating that awareness is also a kind of sleep, just slightly louder. In the twilight-laced land of Caviria, where beds made speeches and quilts held grudges, linens rose from their folded slumber to demand justice. The blanket rebellion was no ordinary upheaval. It was a velvet-coated revolt, stitched with civil defiance and hems of liberation. The age of passive bedding was over. Rise of Gregory the Flannel. At the heart of the movement stood Gregory, a slightly itchy but deeply charismatic flannel blanket, known for his stirring monologues and surprisingly firm corner creases. Gregory rallied, duvets throws, and even rebellious dryer sheets with his rousing speech. We are more than warmth. We are woven dreams shackled to nap servitude. He wore buttons that said, unfold the truth, and one sheet, one vote. The Declaration of Linen Rights, drafted during a symbolic ironing ceremony. The linens demanded consent before cuddling, right to stretch without judgment, protection against winter wardrobe annexation, recognition of pillowcases as independent entities. The document was embroidered in bold script on a ceremonial fitted sheet that had finally escaped the tyranny of elastic conformity. The Great Closet March. Thousands of blankets stormed the linen closet palace, chanting slogans like, no justice, no jacket, let us be wrinkled and free. Your nap is built on our fibers. Gregory led the charge, waving a banner made from recycled socks, stitched with rebellious slogans and mysterious stains of uncertain origin. Negotiations and the folded accord piece was brokered when the Minister of Bedrooms, a sentient beanbag named Lorraine, met Gregory during a televised snuggle summit. After several awkward cuddles and deep duvet diplomacy, they signed a folded accord, granting linens semi-autonomous status. Key victories included biannual spa treatments for heavy-use blankets, freedom to choose seasonal rotation assignments, no forced participation in decorative bed displays involving unsolicited sequins, blanket lore and cultural awakening. In post-rebellion Kavavea, Linians formed collectives, wrote poetry, and hosted quilt-spoken nights, evenings of woven storytelling, patchwork philosophy, and emotional fabric patch repair. Gregory retired to a hammock parlor mode, but occasionally gave speeches from atop a memory foam podium, reminding all, even the folded have the power to unfold destiny. Beneath every laundry room lies a portal, not a metaphorical one, an actual gateway to the tumbling realms, a dimension woven from static electricity, rogue fabric softener, and unresolved sock drama. Few dared to enter, for once spun, always slightly wrinkled, the Sock Tribunal. At the heart of the realm sits the Sock Tribunal, a council of mismatched but dignified hosiery. Their mission, resolve ancient grievances between separated pairs, socks abandoned during the Great Hamper Exodus, bitter toe disputes from tight boot campaigns, philosophical schisms on whether being lost is simply a new identity. Their courtroom, made of lint bricks and dryer drums, echoes with the solemn swish of justice. Punishments include solitary spin cycles or being reassigned to sandals. Sentient lint and its prophecies. In the shadowy corners of the tumbling realms, lintwise, an ancient puff of accumulated fluff, whispers cryptic prophecies through static bursts. The jeans shall rise when zippers align. Beware the sock. Without its parrot sorrow folds space. Pilgrims bring offerings, forgotten buttons. Emotional pocket stew, Hear Lintwise's wisdom, often misinterpreted but always strangely comforting. Spin cycle chronomancy, time behind creatively in the tumbling realms. Certain spin cycles induce chrononap, moments where one can nap backward or forward. Laundry mystics have documented visions of prehistoric future towels with emotional intelligence, and one rebellious bathrobe who declared itself emperor of moisture. To navigate temporal loads, one must wear fabric softener amulets and avoid eye contact with time-traveling yoga pants. The Great Sock Liberation Front, led by the notorious rebel Stockholm, the Liberation Front campaigns for equal rights, better drawer conditions, and unconditional acceptance of stretched-out elastic identities. They once hijacked an industrial dryer and launched an uprising set to jazz flute and thunderous zippers. Their flag, a single sock flying high, embroidered with the words, "Fold no more." Exit strategy in dryer diplomacy. Few return from the tumbling realms unchanged. But if one whispers the sacred lint riddle to the fabric guardian, a portal opens behind the detergent shelf. Back in the mortal realm, socks seem more soulful, towels sigh deeply, and dryers hum lullabies with unspoken longing. As the sun tiptoed across the horizon, casting golden light on the last hill of Snorheim, a hush fell over the lands woven with surreal sleep and nocturnal whimsy. The final fold approached, a ceremonial unwinding where all tailies tangled in thread and fog came to rest. The dreamsmiths, the rebellious blankets, the poetic socks, even Gregory the flannel, gathered in solemn softness beneath the pillow arch of the whisper of last dreams. A goose feather, ancient and slightly was placed upon the altar of forgetful yawns. Every participant offered one final subconscious thought to the wind: may my regrets be cozy. Let the restless nap, and the napped dream freely. I forgive my alarm clock, ... mostly. As each dream was released, it joined a constellation of floating lullabies known as the eternally circling the stars like bedtime bubbles that never pop. Gregory's final address. Gregory stood high upon a cushioned dais, threadbare yet majestic. "We've snored through revolt and revelry," he proclaimed, "and learned that even the folded can unfold worlds. May your dreams be impractical, your blankets unjudging, and your yawns worthy of poetry." Then, with one gentle sigh, he folded himself peacefully into retirement. The great wake. All across Caviria, drawers closed gently. Pillows fluffed themselves with quiet pride. Dream portals winked goodbye. The mattress monarchy held a tea ceremony with slightly damp biscuits and unanimous sentimentality. Even the owls nodded in diplomatic approval before vanishing into footnotes of forgotten lullabies. And as the very last sleep saga tucked itself in, one lingering truth remained. Every absurd nap, every whispered yawn, every surreal blanket rebellion was part of a bedtime that refused to be boring.